Hello, and welcome to today's episode of Health University, where I have the pleasure of meeting for the first time live, but I've been fangirling for a while, Catherine Bregman. Catherine is the owner and a fertility coach of Badass Fertility, and I think that name is just so apropos to women struggling with fertility that they are badasses. They are the most courageous beings on the planet, as far as I'm concerned. So Catherine has her own story a little bit that's in her bio, but I want to let you elaborate a bit, Catherine. I understand you had your own experience with the IVF journey, and then you realized that while you were doing all the right things for your body, it was your mind and your emotions that needed some help. So without further ado, welcome. Please elaborate on my introduction of you so that the listeners can know who you are.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really honored to be on your show and so grateful to get to be here today and share my story and the pearls of wisdom that I have elicited from my own experience, as well as my experience working with women around the world who are struggling to conceive. And my journey to this point in my life really started about, oh my gosh, how long ago was it? Probably 7 or 8 years ago when I first started trying to conceive my daughter. And I have the long version of the story and then a more condensed version. So I'll give you the highlights
There you go.
right now. And the highlights are really that I got married at 36, already thought I was quote unquote behind, right? Which now I think to myself, oh my God, 36 is like so young, right? It's nothing. But at the time, I had this very deeply ingrained fear of the clock ticking.
Yeah.
And jumped right into trying to conceive with my husband after actually initially we got pregnant very quickly, but we miscarried.
Mhm.
I lost that pregnancy several weeks into the pregnancy, and
Mhm.
then I did not get pregnant again for 3 years.
Oh my.
And that was despite doing everything I could find under the sun to work on my physical body. Because, of course, going into it, I automatically assumed there's something wrong with my body, there's something wrong with me. And I did have, physical issues that needed to be resolved after about a year of trying, doing acupuncture, taking supplements. I went down the IVF route. My IVF doctor said, at that point I was 37, getting close to 38. He thought that I had endometriosis
Oh
because
my.
I had a lot of the, um, like 8 out of the 10 factors that would
Mhm.
determine whether or not someone had endo, I
Mhm.
had. So he said, we're not going to do the laparoscopy. We're just going to assume you have it
Mhm.
and treat you as if you do.
Mhm.
I had elevated NK cells,
Mhm.
which, is something that is rooted in inflammation, which, as I always teach the women in my program, also we have so much control over that when it comes to our minds and how we respond to life.
Absolutely.
So I had all of these different, physical barriers, but the truth is, at the end of the day, what helped me finally conceive was getting my mindset straight.
Mhm.
Because when I was given this diagnosis of all of these things that were wrong, I immediately went into fight or flight mode. I
Mhm.
immediately went into, oh my God, I'll do anything to fix it. Just tell me what I have to do. That led us down two routes of IVF, both of which led to no genetically normal embryos,
Oh,
which was
sorry.
absolutely devastating.
Mhm.
After the second failed egg retrieval, I decided to take a break.
Mhm.
And, as someone who was about to turn, 39 at that point, taking a break is not something that you're really quote unquote supposed to do,
I
right?
understand. Mhm.
But it was absolutely the smartest thing I ever could have done, because the cycle before I was scheduled to go back for my third egg retrieval, I got pregnant naturally.
Fantastic.
And the reason I
Beautiful.
did is, I truly believe, is because I learned how to get in touch with myself in a way that led me to make choices that were the right ones for me. Because
Mhm.
no one person, as I know is the same. We
Right.
all have our own individual blocks, our own individual kind of protocols that we need. And when we're afraid of never having our dream come true, we become disconnected at that moment when we need to be the most connected.
Mhm,
And
mhm.
so, what I have become very convinced of and very passionate about is helping women reconnect with themselves so that they can make the empowering choices that are going to lead them to their babies.
Absolutely. That's beautifully said, really beautifully said.
Mhm.
And it is so true that we can have the most perfect embryo and the most perfect uterine lining, and sometimes that doesn't make a baby, which is
Yes.
crushing. But it
Yes.
also just warrants this sort of deeper investigation as to why, what's happening.
Right.
And oftentimes it is, we are mind, body, spirit beings, and certainly conception, birth, and death are three times in life when we are at the crossroads most discreetly, if you will, of
Yeah.
mind, body, and spirit. That we can't reduce it to, well, your labs look great, your diet's good, so good luck with that. Because
Right.
at this time in life, what our minds and our spirits are doing influences our hypothalamus pituitary ovarian axis,
Hmm.
influences some of the times in which we really allow um, for growth, for follicle growth. Follicle growth happens at a particular time in the cycle, but if we're tight and still, really devastated or grieving over that the period started 2 days ago, we're missing a really beautiful window of
Mm.
growth. So,
Yeah.
yeah. So I want to put in a plug, if I may, just to say that as a certified miracle-minded master coach and a certified life coach, you are the only person who has ever been trained as a fertility coach with Marianne Williamson. Is that correct?
That is correct. Yes.
Amazing, amazing. And certainly we all know Marianne Williamson, speaks most eloquently to the mind-body connection, and that this is science. This isn't woo. This isn't,
Right.
just
Right.
kind of a shamanic thing, although shamanism is science as well. But
Sure.
but but we can't forgive me, throw the baby out with the bathwater by only attending to one half of our beingness. So how do people work? How do you work with people? How do people work with you?
Oh my goodness. Okay. Thank you so much. I love everything that you just said. And I love so much how you position fertility on that larger plane of mind, body, spirit as a doctor with your perspective on the physical body, right?
Mhm,
And your
mhm,
expertise, and also this elevated awareness of the fact that reproduction is not purely physical.
mm-mm,
I mean, we are raised in health class to think that that's all it is. And,
mm,
you have unprotected sex one time and you might get pregnant, but
mhm,
there's so much more going on. And, again, like I know for myself and I know for the women I work with that sometimes the blocks are emotional. There and the mind and the body come together, like we were saying with the natural killer cells, to create a state of being in the body that may actually be better healed through the mind. And
mhm,
so even in saying that, I'm starting to step a little bit outside of my expertise because I am really, my focus with women is on emotional wellness, as
mhm,
I call it. And
mhm,
and what that really stems from is, I'll talk a little bit about my work with Marianne, and then
mm.
I'll talk a little bit about how that connects to what I do now.
Okay.
So, I am one of about 50 women, roughly speaking, who had the opportunity to work in a cohort with Marianne for about 15 months that was created during COVID, actually.
Mhm,
And
mhm,
so it was one of those sort of rare and wonderful outgrowths of everybody being in isolation. And it really changed my life
mm,
because I was already coaching women. I had already decided I wanted to pursue fertility coaching. But what working with Marianne did for me is it really validated all of the beliefs that I have about our power to connect with our higher self
mhm,
and access that information as a form of healing. And when I say healing, it's not like just like, oh, the woo woo, but really healing like your emotional body, which translates to the physical body. We know that that is true.
Mhm.
So working with her expanded my perception of what is possible when women come together in a sacred space and have space held for them to unfold what is blocking them,
Mm.
whether it's emotionally, um, spiritually,
Mhm.
and start to transform as a result of that experience.
Mhm.
So in my program, when I work with women, I did one-on-one for a long time, and I continue to do one-on-one, but I found that there was another element that was so valuable that was missing, and that was the group,
Community.
and
Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah.
And so, and even, talking about science, I know there's a study by Harvard Medical School that shows that women who participate in support groups increase their odds of conception by
Isn't that
50%.
wild? Yeah, it's wild, but it shouldn't be, right? I mean,
Exactly,
it is
exactly.
intuitively and innately understandable. And I think that
Yes,
our love of science, our infatuation with science, has taken us away from what we really know intuitively. Because if it
yes,
can't be proven in a
right,
double-blind, placebo-controlled study, then
right.
then maybe it's not true. When yet, in fact, clinical study after clinical study after clinical study demonstrates that or there is a causal relationship there between feeling
Mhm.
in community, not being isolated, not feeling like you're broken, and then
Yeah,
having these healing opportunities present themselves that, of course, we don't know at the end of the day, will that bring, babe in arms, but it will bring
right.
healing regardless. And that's
Yes,
the first step.
yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely. It's so true. It's so true. And so I found that that piece was really vital. And I began to I created a program that offers um, what I call like three different legs, right? That kind of hold up the table. And one of the legs is a support group, and we
Mhm.
meet twice a month. Um, and we come together, and it takes on all kinds of forms. It could be me leading the meditation, and then we talk about the meditation, or it could be a particular topic that's the subject of the day, and everybody talks on that topic. But
Mhm.
what's really most valuable, I have found, is women getting to hear from and talk to other women with an expert facilitator. And my background, before I worked with Marianne and went into coaching, I actually have 2 advanced degrees in education and
Mhm.
research.
Yeah.
So I was a qualitative researcher at the University of Florida for 4 years before I kind of shifted over into what I do now. And
Mhm.
so I have a really strong research background, and so I appreciate the value of research. But then, like you, I also see, the shortcomings. But the fact that not everything is empirically provable.
Right. I also jokingly say that anything that has been proven in science existed before it was proven. So,
Yes.
so like, the argument just kind of goes, sideways immediately.
Right, right. It's
Uh-huh.
true. And I mean, it's a very, very valuable tool, but we
Absolutely.
want to use it, leverage its power, not be limited by it.
Mhm.
Right. So yeah.
And if I
But
may,
mhm.
because how I really came to reach out to you was I
Yeah.
had a visceral yes girl response to a post that you had made surrounding your suffering over how many people are out there, attempting to, and probably with all good intention, intending
Mhm.
to be helpful, but they
Mhm.
don't have the
Mhm.
the learning. And
Mhm.
so and that can be dangerous and I'm being a little dramatic, but it can be dangerous for a person who has, perhaps
Yeah.
a very short window of opportunity, if that
Mhm.
person is going to go down a garden path without really knowing what are the
Yeah.
credentials of this person, what is this person bringing to
Yeah.
really help me
Yeah.
realize my dream of family. Then
Right.
it can be really a heartbreaking loss. And so I really so appreciate you taking that stand that day, because it was clear that, it
Mhm.
was an emotional moment for you to say, I got to speak to this. And I think that
Yeah.
the listeners also want to hear that as well, that it is so important that you find someone who has credential. And I don't mean just, the 23 years experience, because you could have 23 years
Right.
of experience still not with credential,
Right.
but really, make sure that your support team is verifiable, if you will.
Yeah. And I think it's so tricky because, like you said, you know, oh my gosh. I mean, I always think of coaching as something that helps you navigate the information overload of fertility,
Mhm.
right? So that's one of the main things that I bring to the table when I'm working with women is, all right, you've got a tremendous amount of options here, ranging from going naturally to doing IVF with ICSI to maybe even egg donor or surrogacy or, everything in between. How are you supposed to figure out what's right for you?
Mhm.
And so, ironically, I think of myself as someone who helps women, like I said, come out of that information overload. I'm not a doctor. I cannot tell women what they need to do specifically for their bodies. What I can do is help them get in line with their mind so that they then make better choices with regard to their bodies, so that they can filter out, let's say, the showmen from the real wise experts on these topics.
Mhm.
But what is happening, and I guess it's, I don't want to say this to be negative, but I do feel it's true. And what I was speaking to in that Instagram reel is that, people kind of start to like jump on the bandwagon, and they start getting, a 3-month certificate and they have no experience in anything else. And I've even spoken with individuals who have said, I got people in my program and then I didn't know what to do with them.
Mhm.
And I'm
Wow.
like, then why do
Wow.
you have a program?
Exactly. Oh my
Like,
goodness. Yes.
you need
Yes.
to know first. And I'm not saying you have to have it all figured out, because sometimes, we learn as we go and we
Well, and the
grow.
field, right? The field itself is
Yeah.
is learning as it's going, still 50 years in,
Right.
but it's
Yes,
still a
we're always,
relatively
yeah.
infantile stage of science. But yes, that is that it sits in my gut, a little bit hard when I have a person come in after having been 6 months either Dr. Googling or
Yeah.
seeing someone, and a plethora of supplements and all these
Mhm.
restricted diets and so forth. And I look and say, you're actually on the wrong. I don't say it out loud, but
Yeah.
I gently kind of sort of regroup her to the right supplements and diet for her, because oftentimes
Mhm.
she's on the wrong stuff.
Oh my
Yeah,
gosh.
yeah.
I know. It's just so upsetting,
Mhm.
and that's where I always come back to that question of, how do you get in touch with yourself to really know? Because I do believe we know on our gut level when something is right and when it feels off.
Mhm.
But again, when we're in that place of fear,
Mhm.
we're more inclined to kind of shut that voice up or shut it down and be like, no, 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 no. I just need to keep doing what this person's telling me. I don't have
Mhm.
much time left. I just have to
Mhm.
keep going. And then, like you said earlier in the show, we wind up wasting more time and more
Right.
money,
Right, right, right.
you know?
And I love that you speak to this sort of innate wisdom that
Yeah.
every person carries, if we just allow
Yeah.
the time and the space to support it. I will say that when I do my best work, it's when I shut up and listen. Because if I shut up long enough and listen hard enough or well enough, that person's going to tell me everything I need to know. And then I almost just filter it, if you will, through my
Mhm.
lens of traditional Chinese medicine and,
Mhm.
reproductive medicine, and feed it back so that that person can really comprehend and understand and say, oh yes, what's ironic is they say, oh, you heard me, you saw me. And really,
Yeah.
I want for them to see themselves, because empowerment is mother energy. It's, that's the beginning step, right? If you can make your own, put your own flag in the soil and say, this is my stand, that's mother energy.
Mm. And that makes me want to share a story actually from my experience to
Please.
illustrate what we're saying. Because I think for a lot of women, it can feel very abstract. Like, okay, yeah, I get it, but how am I supposed to, follow my gut?
Mhm.
Right? When I'm so
Mhm.
scared and I'm so nervous. And And I will say two things up. Number one, it really takes practice
Yes.
and having someone who can help you develop the tools.
Mm-hmm.
And it's also the most natural thing in the world once you start learning how to do it. And I remember when I was doing IVF and I had my two failed egg retrievals, I had come across this doing my Dr. Google, right? I had come across this technique, which I'm sure you must have heard of one version of it, but it's called clear passage or the Wern technique.
Mm-hmm.
It's also somewhat similar to, I believe, like the Mercier technique.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
it's specifically a form of external physical therapy for women who have endometriosis or other tissues that kind of bind their tubes.
Mm-hmm.
So I had been diagnosed with what my IVF doctor lovingly called kinky tubes.
Okay.
And he said, right, it was kind of an informal joke, not even a joke, but just a weird label that he gave me to describe the fact that my fallopian tubes were kind of like a roller coaster,
Mm-hmm.
and they were bound with a lot of tissue. And
Mm-hmm.
when I came across this this physical therapy, I immediately had this like gut response.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, oh my God, like this just feels right for me,
Mm-hmm.
because I wanted a sort of a more natural therapy. And it's really a manual massage, but it's stretched to call it a massage because it's very intense.
Mm-hmm.
And you work your abdomen externally and break down the tissues that are
Mm-hmm.
binding the tubes.
Mm-hmm.
So I had come across it once before I even started IVF. And I said, this feels so right, but no, I have to save my money for IVF. I can't afford it. I can't do it. Forgot about it, moved on. Two failed egg retrievals later, I'm back to Dr. Google. It pops up again.
Yeah.
And of all the things that always were popping up, this one just kind of like had my attention in this unique sort of resonant way. And I thought, you know what? I'm going to look into this. And then I actually looked into it with the acupuncturist I was working with, and
Mm-hmm.
she happened to know one of the people who practice this technique. So I started getting clues from the universe like, yes, you're on the right path. You're on the right path. So now I had like a verifiable local contact who came with good recommendation to practice this technique. And I said, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this. And only reason I was able to make that choice is because I was already working on my mindset.
Mm-hmm.
I already had, developed my own version of like a morning routine that like centered and balanced me. I've been working with a coach, doing the tools that I needed, learning the tools I needed to make these decisions. And I went to my IVF doctor and I told him about the procedure. And he said, don't do that. It's a waste of your money.
Mm.
He's like, there's no research on it in the medical journals.
There you go.
Exactly. They're just trying to steal your money. And I was so upset. But old Catherine, like Catherine before doing the work, would have taken his advice
Authority.
as, as authority and thought, well, I must be silly. I'm so glad that he saved me the trouble, of wasting my time and money. But I remember I left that appointment and I said to my husband, I don't care what he says. I'm doing it.
Great. Mama energy.
Yes, that's exactly it. It's the mama energy.
Uh-huh.
It's the mama energy. And I went and I worked with this woman. Her name is Susan Winograd. She's amazing. She's a women's pelvic health specialist. You guys should meet.
I'd love to. I'd love to.
Yeah,
I refer to pelvic floor physical therapy all the time.
it's so powerful. And it's another thing that we don't learn about,
Of
in
course.
the mainstream trajectory of fertility.
Mm-hmm.
So I worked with her. I did this process. That very next cycle was when I got pregnant naturally.
Oh, that's beautiful. That's beautiful. And I'm just going to purport that it was the weave of it all. It was the shift of your mindset that then allowed for your wisdom to say, this is the way. And then of course the physical manipulation that opened the pathway literally for conception to occur. That's beautiful. What a lovely story. And now you've got your daughter to prove it.
Yes. And that's exactly it. I mean, it is the mind body. It's not like changing your thoughts is going to magically get you pregnant, but it, like you said, it opens those channels to make new choices that lead to the results you're seeking.
And, you and I could geek out on the science and throw all the hormonal words and the axes and all of that. but I think that just mucks up the conversation because
Yeah.
again, that's science explaining what is happening anyway. So I think if we just take it to its purest, it truly is, the daily discipline, because we wake up every day, we may as well have this discipline every day of self-care, self-empowerment, and then action steps, right? Because we're not just
Yes.
sitting in lotus on the side of a mountain and then
Right.
miraculously getting pregnant. We do need to take the action steps, such as your action steps of getting that massage, such as
Yeah.
action steps that I will have, my patients or clients do. If they're patients,
Mhm.
it includes acupuncture. If they're clients, and out of state or out of my zip code, it includes what I call acupoint stimulation that they can do on
Mm.
their own. That it's
Yeah.
doing that very same thing. It's literally engaging mind. We've got guided imagery, we've got qigong, and then we've got these targeted circulation
Oh, I
techniques
love
that
that.
really just help this person feel empowered that I'm going to use the pronoun she, can really do this on her own. And
Yeah.
we are there as guides and support. We are not there as some gods or goddesses or magical figures that are going to make this happen or not.
It's so true. It's
Yeah.
so true. And I think that's where sometimes people get confused, is this idea of, well, it's either, I'm sitting in lotus position on a mountaintop magically getting pregnant, or I'm doing IVF,
Hmm.
right? And that
Hmm.
there's somehow nothing in between. But I think what we're both, strongly passionate about educating people on is that there is so much in between, and that that's
Absolutely.
really where the true magic, the true results of becoming pregnant often are for
Hmm.
women.
Absolutely. And I personally, in my work, especially in private practice, a strong advocate for IVF, especially if
Yes.
a person is coming in saying that, they want more than one child, and they're 36 or 37 years old. I'm like, okay, let's shift the conversation. However, it doesn't mean go straight to IVF this minute, because what you're going into IVF with this minute is exactly how you are, which
Yeah.
might be, needing some clearance, some toxicity clearance, some mindset clearance, some
Yeah.
practices, some improved targeted circulation, so that those ovaries and the follicles and the eggs within can get better nutrient dense blood flow. So
Definitely.
yeah, so it is
Absolutely.
not an either or. It
Absolutely
can
not.
be either or, and it
Mhm.
can be and. These things can be done
Yes.
concurrent with an IVF cycle if for whatever
Right.
reason, time is of the essence.
Absolutely. I
Yeah,
agree with that
yeah.
completely. And I think, so much about the success of any endeavor is contingent upon how you are mind and body going into it. So, like you're saying, the more that you can prepare, physically, mentally, and really be in a place where you are open to whatever it is you're doing, whether it's IVF or acupuncture or what have you, but the openness
Right.
is what's going to really serve you, I think, and amplify success. I see that
I
happening with
agree. I
women all the
couldn't agree
time.
more. And I think it
Yeah.
also amplifies the success of the partner relationship, because
Yeah.
certainly some people are going in to be single parents by choice. More often than not, in my experience, there's a couple that is
Mhm.
wanting to become parents, and sometimes this desperate gerbil wheel activity of the one who has the ovaries and uterus
Yeah.
has the relationship kind of get some tension or separation,
Yeah.
because the
Yeah.
partner is kind of going, you know I don't know what to do here to help. But I
Right.
think when there is this intentional, disciplined work together, practice, I don't want to call it discipline, practice work together, I think it really does enhance the relationship as well, because they're in it together.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
agree with that.
Yeah.
I definitely do. I think that the struggle to conceive is often the biggest challenge that a couple have faced together.
Mhm.
And it's so unexpected for so many. Like, people expect to struggle to save and pay for a mortgage, right? Or they expect to struggle to pay off their student loan debt. They expect those things, but they don't expect to confront this very scary and challenging experience. And
Yeah.
that, it makes it an opportunity for the relationship to really grow.
Exactly.
and it can prepare you for the trials of parenthood,
Exactly.
right? Which
It's
will
mama
surely
and
come.
papa bear energy, or mama and mama bear energy, but it's parenting energy. That's when
Yeah,
we're on the same team doing it together. Yes, that's
exactly.
beautiful. Well, I also want, I don't know when this is going to air. I'm going to hope to see if I can get it to air real soon, because
Great.
we
Yeah.
are in National Infertility Awareness Week. And,
Yes.
Resolve and the American Society of Reproductive Medicine are doing a whole lot, thankfully, because
Mhm.
in this time and space continuum right now, we have a whole lot of crazy going on
Yeah,
around the conversation of reproductive rights and freedoms and IVF
we
and
do.
so forth. So
Yes.
with that in mind, is there anything that you would like? We're talking about raising awareness, and so, and I know that this conversation is really about raising awareness of our mental health and our intentionality. But is there anything else you would like to add to the conversation, to the listeners, so that they can say, you know
Mm.
what? It's National Infertility Awareness Week. I'm going to raise my consciousness around this. And also, how do they reach out to you?
Well, what came to mind for me when you brought that up, and I'm just going to say the word, people may like me or not like me as a
Mhm,
result of it, but the notion of patriarchy came up for me.
mhm,
And one of the things that I want to say, and I do talk about this on my podcast occasionally, I have talked about it before, but the way in which we as women have historically been socialized
mhm,
to defer to quote unquote experts and
mhm.
authority figures, including our doctors.
Right.
And I believe that that carries over heavily into our experiences when we go into an IVF clinic, because number one, when you struggle to conceive, it challenges your identity as a woman,
Absolutely.
right? Because we have internalized the messaging that becoming a mother is one of the most, is like the pinnacle of femininity,
Mhm,
right? So
mhm.
if you're struggling with that, it becomes a reflection on, you feel as if it is a reflection on you.
Right.
So you are already in this sort of position of feeling shame or embarrassment even to be there.
Mhm,
And then on top of it, the history of Western medicine is one of placing the doctor on the pedestal and the patient sort of below them, following their orders. And that's great if you have a broken arm and you need the doctor to fix the broken arm, because a broken arm is a very clear-cut thing. I'm not a doctor, but generally speaking, I would say there's a couple of ways to fix it. They pick the best one, done.
mhm.
Fertility, like we've talked about on this show, is so much more multi-layered.
Uh-huh.
And so
Absolutely.
for Infertility Awareness Week, I would encourage women to find their voice in their clinic, to advocate for themselves, to be, if you're not the biggest pain in the butt patient, you are not asking for enough of your needs to be met,
Mhm,
right? Like you
mhm,
want to be the squeaky wheel. If everyone at the clinic thinks you're really nice, you're probably not speaking up for yourself enough.
mhm. Yeah,
So
beautiful.
be don't be afraid, right,
Mhm.
to really advocate for yourself. Walk into your clinic like you own the place.
I will often say to patients, we work for you. And in fact,
Exactly.
we work for your ovaries and uterus. So because there is this tendency to defer and then
Yeah.
scramble and see if Dr. Google agrees with what you've just referred to with
Yes.
the so-called authority figure. But all of that, you can almost feel it in this conversation. It chips away a little bit at our ability to say, you know what, actually, I have something to contribute here. I've lived in this
Yes.
body my whole damn life, and so
Yeah.
I probably have something to add that could help us all, help me. Yeah, that's
Yes. And
beautiful.
even simple things like making sure you ask all your questions.
Mhm, mhm,
Have a list of those questions, make yourself ask them.
mhm,
So often we don't write them down, or we only ask two or three because we don't want to be pushy,
mhm,
or we don't
mhm.
want to be rude or take up our doctor's time.
Mhm.
Be
And,
pushy.
oftentimes
Yeah.
now, I mean, you just, put them in the portal so that they can,
Yeah.
review them in advance, because sometimes you're
Exactly.
right, there literally isn't time
Mhm.
in that appointment time, but if they've had a chance to review and then they can just spurt out answers, that's going to save a good 20 minutes because they've already
Yeah.
had the time, taken the time to review. Yeah, I
Exactly.
think that's brilliant. That's brilliant.
Thank
So
you.
all information will be in the show notes for how you can reach Catherine. And
Yes,
yeah, I'll make sure that everything's there. And I really can't thank you enough. I think that we could just chat for
we really
another hour
could.
or so. And I'd love to have you back,
Thank
maybe
you.
closer to Advocacy Day, Infertility Advocacy Day
Yes,
in
that would be
May. We'll
wonderful.
circle back and do this again.
That
So
sounds great.
I really can't thank you enough because truly we spend so much time focusing on labs and gonads that we forget
Yeah.
to focus on the whole person, especially the invisible part of the person that is really what lights us up.
Yes. And I
Yeah,
will say, real quick for anyone who's listening, I do have the Badass Fertility Program, which I call the BFP, is opening for its spring cohort in mid to late May. We're starting May 22nd. So if you are
fantastic.
interested, yes, in learning more about how to be part of this amazing group of women and getting the tools I talked about, check those show notes and I'll put a link in there to get more information.
Beautiful. Thank you. Boy, that's timely. Oh, good. Then yeah, then I'm going to turn this one around pretty quickly so people have time to
Thank you.
to get in
Yes,
and
that
get
would be
registered.
awesome. Yeah,
Well, thank you very, very much. I really look
my
forward to seeing
pleasure.
you on social media and
Yes.
when we can next connect for another conversation.
Me
All right.
too. Thank you
Until
so much for
then,
having me.
listeners, thanks for your listening audience time. And I guess at Health University, we will say class dismissed.